So it's an all too common scenario. You get into the content creation world and you spend 90 to 95% of your budget on the coolest new camera body out there. And then you just focus the rest of your budget on those aftermarket accessories for dirt cheap. I'm going to tell you now, it's a huge mistake to do this, and all too often I see new shooters do that, and they don't realize that they're shifting that labor to another place, because you're going to be spending time in post-production fixing bad audio from a subpar microphone or stabilizing footage from a tripod that's wiggling all around. And you need to think of your kit as an entire bubble, with all of these things contributing as an ecosystem to the final product. So I'm going to briefly talk about some of the most common things that people end up cheaping out way too often on, and you should end up spending a little bit more to get so much more value and save you time and headache. So the first thing I want to talk about, and probably the most common mistake I see with new shooters, is bad audio. And there's actually a couple different ways you can remedy this, because it makes a huge difference in your final product. It's actually a lot easier for you to watch something with great audio that's a subpar image than it is to watch something with an amazing image with subpar audio. Because of that, I'm going to recommend a couple different things. Please bring your microphone as close to the sound source as possible. If you're clipping that onto your camera in the cold shoe, you're already doing something wrong, unless you're out there vlogging and the camera's a foot away from you. Try and invest in a halfway decent mic stand that you can put maybe a foot or two above the actual talent when you're recording dialogue for interviews, or just maybe even have a friend boom for you. Any one of these things will exponentially increase the audio quality that you have in your final product, simply because it'll drown out all the noise, offer much better off-axis rejection on the microphone, and just in general amplify the sound source while reducing everything else that you don't want. Try and control the actual sound as much as possible in the room you have, or if you're out and about. Obviously, if you're shooting a documentary in New York, it might be a little hard to control the traffic sounds, but you can utilize the shotgun's off-axis rejection to point it away from traffic. If your camera audio is not cutting it, it might actually be time to invest in a dedicated audio hardware option. A lot of first-party manufacturers actually do have XLR add-ons for their higher-end cameras, or there are third-party ones that are universal, or even an external audio recorder. So these are going to offer you better, higher quality preamps with less noise, less hiss. They're going to have more dynamic range for incoming louder sounds, and the most obvious benefit is you're just going to be able to record more things at once with more inputs. All of these things are pretty much a no-brainer for $100, $200 on the used market. Listen to sound tests, what people say about using the microphones in the field or the audio recorders, or what people actually say on their sales websites, because those things are going to save you time and money in post-production, and audio is one of those things that's such a headache to deal with for a lot of people because they're too busy focusing on maybe fixing visual aspects or framing or composition. And if you could nail it right in camera as close to the end product as possible, like you would with shooting visually, it's the same thing with sound. The second thing that I think is super important is your stabilization. Now, I'm not talking about fancy gimbals or sliders or anything like that. The thing that I think is most important on this one is tripods. A lot of people out there tend to buy the cheapest tripod possible simply because they think it just holds your camera. And obviously you don't want your camera to tip over, but there are a lot of other quality of life things that I think are important to look out for. Before I even start this though, I think it's important that this one in particular, just look in the used market. There's so many people out there who are upgrading to the latest and greatest, to carbon fiber, to smaller ones, to bigger ones, and you don't need to spend big bucks to get whatever is out there. But I'm going to tell you right now, you should look out for a bowl head at least, because that way you can level out the camera independently from the legs. This means you don't have to futz around with adjusting different heights and things like that to actually get it straight with the horizon line. Makes it so much easier to work with. The second thing you should look for is a video-specific tripod. These typically have more granular height adjustments or things inside of them that are more conducive to a video workflow, such as mounting points or things like that. But most importantly, and the last one, is a fluid head. Now, a fluid head is different than something like a ball head or a photography tripod because you're going to be using it for things like panning and tilting, and you want those to look smooth and creamy and just as great as possible. A fluid head does this typically by having oil inside of it or some sort of other material that's viscous that allows you to kind of slow down your different actions on the camera head. And then just like before, you can always consider renting, or if you're lucky enough to be near a place that has them on display, go ahead and play around with them a little bit to see how they go with your workflow. And then, as always, focus on the used market, especially with tripods, because people always are getting out of this industry or looking to get rid of it or just upgrading to something new. And if they're clearing house, that might mean you can get something with a huge discount for your kit. And then finally, storage devices. This one obviously isn't the most glamorous thing about a camera, but it makes a huge difference because when everything has been shot, downloaded, archived, encoded, edited, it all goes through those different storage mediums. And I'm not just talking about your camera, I'm also talking about the machines that you'll be editing the actual footage on. Because if you're going to cheap out, you might be spending thousands of dollars on data recovery. And it does happen where people out there spend $2 on the AliExpress SD card special, and then their shoot they just did is completely null because the card is corrupt. So what I would recommend is looking out for name brands out there who have a track record. I personally don't recommend investing in incredibly high capacity storage simply because that makes so much of a liability to have all your shots on one thing that could potentially fail, especially if, say, one of those storage cards goes bad and you have 80% of the other footage on different ones. And then secondly, don't go overboard with speed, but find the speed that's correct for your device. A lot of cameras out there are limited by the throughput, whether that's an SD card, a CFast card, a SSD, whatever you're shooting with. There's going to be a maximum speed that you can achieve with any one of those inputs or outputs. So do your research, look out there what's fast enough for your camera while also from a good brand that has great reviews. Look for the read and write speeds most importantly because they are not the same thing. Typically most Amazon, B&H, or Adorama reviews will have them inside of the comments. And unfortunately some storage manufacturers have realized this and they will advertise their storage devices fastest speed, whether that might be the read or write speed, as the actual one on the listing. It's very important to know the distinction between the two. So those are, I think, the three most common scenarios where we just see people out there skimping too much. And that $20 difference that you spend on a better SD card or a better microphone or a better tripod might end up actually saving you thousands of dollars in the long run from not having to hire a sound editor to actually fix bad audio, or somebody out there to correct unstabilized footage, or somebody out there to even do data recovery on an SD card, which can amount to thousands of dollars. And all we're saying is that do your research. With all the different reviews out there, tutorials, blogs, even other people out there who were in your same scenario, because that information is just readily available and free everywhere, there's no reason not to spend the extra time doing that research. And if you even dedicate and compare between all these different companies, you're living in the best time right now to be a content creator because it's never been cheaper to get that high quality hardware. It's only you have to figure out that perfect point when the value per dollar and the actual value per production adds up perfectly. But we want to know what you think. Most importantly, was there anything out there that you just ended up cheaping out on in the very beginning and later down the line you're like, I completely regretted this? Go ahead and comment below because I know there's at least one piece of gear that you probably thought you were going to buy and use forever and just ended up selling it, or you probably bought it and then you used it once and you were like, this isn't for me. But go ahead and comment below, and if you like videos like this, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell icon to be notified of all of our future works. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms to see the content that we're creating in our own stories, such as Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and more. And be sure to check out skyfeatherstudios.com for all the latest industry news. But until then, we'll see you guys next time.